As a business owner who's thinking about selling your business, it's not just about who makes the best offer. You need to make sure that to find the right buyer who can, one, make an acceptable offer, but two, actually close the transaction and get it across the finish line. If you're thinking about selling your business, make sure to properly vet each buyer and make sure that they're qualified. Here are 10 questions that a seller should ask a buyer before accepting their offer. Hi, I'm Trent Lee, and I've sold over 600 businesses. In the last 5 years alone, I've been named the #1 business broker in the country every single year for the most closed transactions. I make these videos so that you'll know exactly what to do when it comes time to sell in your business, and one day reach out to me so I can help you sell the business. Question number 1, what's your experience or background? There are some businesses that don't require experience or licensing, but there are some that just because a buyer wants to buy it doesn't mean they should or even can buy the business. Let me give you a real life example. I have a fantastic paving and grading asphalt company for sale right now. It nets over $1 million cash every single year. They have very clean financials and a great track record. I get all sorts of inquiries from potential buyers who love the numbers, but when I ask them what their experience is, they have no experience in this industry. The problem is, this business requires a QE or a contractor's license to own and operate it. Not to mention, even if a random buyer who had no experience had the money to pay for it, how would they know how to operate it from the day they take over and oversee the staff? As a seller, you need to know what the buyer's background is to see if they have the experience to take over the operations. This is important from a bank perspective too. A bank will want to know, does the buyer have the right background to operate this business? Question number 2, how will you finance the purchase of the business? Are they paying all cash at closing, or do they expect some form of seller financing from you? Or maybe it's a hybrid approach. Maybe there's some bank financing and a little bit of seller finance. Either way, it's important for you to know how they plan to buy the business. Just because they submit an offer doesn't mean anything unless they can actually verify that they have or can get the capital to close the deal. By the way, question number 1 is important here, because if a buyer plans to use a bank to finance the transaction, you know for certain that the bank is going to ask the buyer question number 1, which is, what's their background? What's their experience? The bank needs to have confidence that the buyer can service the debt and operate the business. Question number 3, are you familiar with the day-to-day operations and challenges of this type of business? This one's a little bit more of an in-depth question to our first question. It's one thing for a buyer to say they've worked in the industry, but next, you'll want to know that they're familiar with what you do as a seller for the day-to-day operations, and to make sure they have the capacity and experience to take over for you in what you do day-to-day. And if they don't, they'll need to feel confident that you as a seller can train them post-closing to do what you do. That's okay if they don't necessarily have the experience, as long as you as a seller can train them and they can catch on and learn it. Some industries, a competent buyer can quickly learn, so it isn't that big of a deal. But there are other industries that are so technical, a buyer without really good operational experience in this same industry is going to be a challenge. You need to feel confident that you or an employee can train them easy enough post-closing. I'll give you another example. I have a hair restoration and transplant company for sale. The owner does not do the actual procedures. Medical staff handle that, but the owner handles the sales and marketing. Training someone on sales and marketing can easily be learned. So we don't necessarily need to find someone that has experience in transplanting hair follicles. We just need to find someone that either has experience in sales and marketing or can learn it, and that's a lot easier. Question number 4, what are your long-term goals and plans for the business? This is important for you to know what their long-term vision is. Do they plan to buy the business and hold it forever? Or is this a short-term situation? I'll give you another perfect example. I currently have a granite fabrication for sale. Actually, it's in escrow right now for nearly $20 million. And the buyers have been very clear from the beginning that their plan is to hold this for no more than 5 years. This allows the seller to better understand what the buyer's plans are, and we've been able to structure a deal that works for both buyer and seller because we knew up front what their plans were, and we were able to accommodate both buyer and seller and allow them both to accomplish their goals. Question number 5. How do you envision managing the transition and retaining existing employees? Sellers like to know this because as much as some employees drive you crazy, most of the time, most sellers actually like and care about their employees, and they want to make sure that they have jobs post-closing. Knowing that a buyer will retain them and treat them well and give them opportunity to grow and advance and earn more is often important to sellers. What if the buyer plans to buy the company and let all of the staff go? You want to know this because it's not always about how much money they pay you at closing. It's also about how well they're going to carry on your brand and treat your customers and treat your employees. Because the employees often are working for you to support their family, and sellers will want to know what the buyer's plans are. Here's another real-life example. I have a compound pharmacy for sale right now. We got a very strong offer for someone to buy it cash up front, but it was from a nearby competitor who really wanted to buy them simply to shut them down so that they could control the market a little bit better and get rid of the competition. While the offer was good, the seller cared about his employees and didn't want to see them all fired while he got paid millions at closing and walked away. Next question. What changes or improvements do you plan to make in the business after the acquisition? I love this question because it's a great conversation starter between the buyer and seller, and some really good growth opportunities have come from this type of a question when a seller asks the buyer what they plan to do. Question number 6. What is your timeline for completing the acquisition or completing the sale? This one's important to know so that we understand what the buyer's timeline is and make sure it matches your timeline as a seller. I recently got an offer for a medical practice only to find out that the buyer was going on a 4-month-long European vacation and couldn't even work on the transaction, let alone close it, until after they got home. This didn't work because the seller, ironically enough, because it was a medical practice, but ironically had some medical issues and needed to sell. Regardless of it being a good offer, the buyer's timeline didn't match the seller's timeline, and we weren't able to make a transaction work. So understanding the buyer's timeline helps you as a seller to make sure that there's a good natural fit. Question number 7. Are there any specific contingencies or conditions that you would like to be included in the purchase agreement? This question isn't one that comes to mind for most sellers, but it's vital. Buyers often will have specific due diligence requests and contingencies that need to be met in order for them to first close the transaction and get comfortable moving forward. As a seller, you'll want to know what those terms are to make sure that you can satisfy them and that you understand and know what they are ahead and before accepting their offer. I'll give you another example. Again, we just sold an auto mechanic shop that also happens to be a used car dealership. We closed this transaction last week, and the buyer in his offer wanted the residential investment property that was next door to the shop and the car lot. This happened to be owned by the seller, but it was totally separate from the business. It was an investment house in a residential investment property, but the buyer wanted it to be included. Because we were upfront and we were clear about the expectations and the contingencies and the due diligence items and what was being included in the purchase price when the buyer made the offer, we were able to negotiate and close the transaction because we found a way for it to work for both the buyer and the seller. And that only works by being upfront in the offer, and that only works by asking the right questions upfront. So if you're thinking about selling your business, let me make this as easy as possible for you. I charge nothing for the valuation. I charge nothing to take your business to the market. I'm so confident that I can sell your business at a price that you're comfortable with. I don't get paid, until you get paid. So if you're thinking about selling your business, reach out to me. I'll do a full business appraisal. We'll determine the fair market value of your business. We'll discuss how long it will likely take to find a buyer and close the transaction, all while you have no obligation to pay me anything unless and until I can sell your business. So reach out to me when the time's right. I look forward to working with you. Thanks. Take care.